Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing my March wrap-up. Buckle in because I read 18 books in March. 18! And I'm still not entirely sure how that happened. I mean, I know that I read 11 during spring break, but So, these are going to be some pretty quick wrap-ups. I might be talking a little quickly because, again, 18. Let's get started. The first two I read were The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. These are books 2 and 3 in his Dark Materials trilogy, which I started in February. I honestly did not really enjoy these. I think they're really dark. I enjoyed some of the parts of the world. I also didn't enjoy the romance that ended up happening. It felt kind of forced and ridiculous, but overall I gave them as a whole a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby, which is Joss Silver Scribbles Reads pick for March. I hated this book, it's safe to say. I gave it a 1 out of 5 stars, primarily because it is a collection of essays, which I don't have a problem with, but this collection of essays is self-deprecating to the point of self-hatred and just complains constantly and uses obscenities as if they're passive verbs. I'm usually fine with obscenity and essays and self-deprecatingness, but this one took everything to the farthest possible limit of not okay. Then I read The House of the Four Winds by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory. This book I actually really loved. This follows Clarice as she is the eldest of 12 daughters of this small duchy in the middle of this fantasy Europe, basically. She is taught fencing as one of the princesses because the duchy doesn't have enough money to provide for 12 dowries. So each princess, when they reach the age of 18, goes out into the world and earns her own living. She chooses to do so by becoming a fencing master or mistress, except she has to get there and sort of create her reputation by hiding her real identity, and so she goes undercover as a man. She boards a ship, and then there's some piracy involved, and there's definitely a romance in this, but it's well done. The tropes are absolutely there. I mean, she's going undercover as a boy, but they're well done. Again, I love Mercedes Lackey, and basically everything she does is good. So, 5 out of 5 stars for me. I also completed a series, which is The Land of Stories by Chris Colfer, starting with the 5th book, An Author's Odyssey, and then the 6th book, Worlds Collide. These two books I actually enjoyed. This was probably my least favorite one, book number 5, because it takes place in Connor's stories as opposed to your typical fairy tales. It did tie in well to the 4th and 6th books, but it wasn't quite my thing. However, I think I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars anyway. I gave the 6th book a 5 out of 5 stars because this actually wrapped up the entire series really nicely without seeming like it was forced or unrealistic. I also read The Burning Time by Virginia Rounding, which is a nonfiction work surrounding the burning of heretics during the 1528 to 1568 period, namely with Henry VIII and his daughter Mary Tudor. I absolutely loved this book. There's snark and the author's personality comes through all the time. And then, as well as that, obviously there's a lot of history in this book, which is right up my alley. It's right in my favorite time period, and it's something I didn't know a lot about. It also helped me to understand a lot more of the religious idiosyncrasies and reasons that these two religions were not getting on as well as they were. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I also read The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson this month. I meant to get to it in February, but that didn't happen, so March it was. This is another nonfiction book about 1894 Chicago World's Fair. 1892 Chicago World's Fair, my bad. And specifically the architecture of the World Fair and then the murders that were happening in Chicago at the same time. To be honest, I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's well written and I love the name dropping. For example, there was Elias Disney had something to do with the creative part of the World's Fair, and his son Walt would remember that kind of stuff. So I really liked that and just all the little historical tidbits that were put in this book. But overall, I didn't necessarily want to read that much about the murderer because I don't care that much. Honestly, I find Jack the Ripper more exciting, or anybody that I've heard of, but I had no idea who this guy was. I then read The Guerlain Tower by Katherine Arden. As I've said before, I think, I didn't realize this was the second book in a trilogy, the first one being The Bear and the Nightingale by her, which has taken over YouTube recently. This is a Russian fairy tale, more or less. The main character, Vasya, runs away from home and gets involved with these celestial beings. There's a lot of Russian mythology and folklore in this story, which I really loved. It's something new to me, and it was incredibly well written. You can really tell how much research the author has done into this. Now that I've read it, knowing that it's a series, I'm going to go back and read the first one, but it does perfectly well as a standalone. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. One of my favorite books this month was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This one has blown up BookTube recently. I've got a couple of those, and for good reason. This one got 5 out of 5 stars for me. There will be a review coming up soon because I loved this book. There's a young girl named Zelly, and she lives in a world where she remembers where magic used to be flourishing, and then this king came and completely obliterated everything to do with magic, including her people, who are called magi. So she has the white hair, which means she's basically tormented for it. She's treated very differently. And then she goes on this quest to bring back magic. There's romance and adventure, and the descriptions are just breathtaking. I have so many questions, and I need the second book to come out as soon as possible because of the ending of this book. But absolutely loved it, 5 out of 5 stars. I then read Heartberries by Therese Marie Mailhot. This was Emma Watson's book club pick for March and April. This is a autobiography by a Native American woman. It's a really short little autobiography, but it packs a punch. It's also one of those books that you kind of need to read it once or twice to really get an impact, and you take out of it what you want to. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, I believe, because it felt much smaller, and there were parts of it that were a little weird, but at the same time I think maybe that's my experience reading it as a white person who has not gone through any of this. I also read This Is Where It Ends by Marika Nijkamp. This takes place during the 54 minutes of a school shooting. I didn't rate this one. It was an incredibly hard read. Then I read 3 Dark Crowns and 1 Dark Throne by Kendar Blake. These books follow 3 princesses who are apparently queens, which doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just my thing. Anyway, 3 queens who have to kill the other 2 off in order to be the queen. And yeah. The first one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. The second one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Primarily because the first one just felt like it was setting up for the second one. This one, 3 Dark Crowns, felt very like an extended exposition, and it didn't need to be that long. I didn't need to get to know them that well without really anything important happening. I thought they were actually going to be trying to kill each other in this one, which, surprise, they're not. They do finally get to that in this one, and I liked this one a lot better, although I don't understand the ending of this one, and I think it felt like a cop-out, even though I think there's another book or however many coming out. So this isn't my favorite series. The second one I think is definitely better though. I also read Life in Motion, Young Readers Edition by Misty Copeland. This is an autobiography of Misty Copeland, the ballerina with the American Ballet Theater Group. She is the first African-American ballerina, principal ballerina I believe, with ABT, and this is a version of her story very much so targeted to 10-year-olds, which is why I gave it 3 stars. It seemed overly simple to me, and there wasn't enough detail in it to satisfy me. However, you will see in April I am reading the adult version of it, so hopefully that will be much better. Not that that book was bad, it was just a little young. I also read a couple of classics in March, one of which was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. About halfway through spring break I realized that I had been reading about a book a day and I wanted to keep that up, but it was 10 o'clock at night and I wanted to go to sleep, so I went and found the shortest book I could on my shelves, which is this one, 124 pages, and decided to read this to keep up my book a day habit. This is about an old man who goes fishing and catches this huge fish That's literally the plot. It's not the most exciting story I've ever read. However, the writing is really fun, and I remember in middle and high school people reading Hemingway and saying, yeah, he's like that iceberg picture we always saw, you know? 1/9 is above the water and the rest of it's below the water. And so you really have to dig into it and interpret it. Obviously, I don't have the skills or the motivation to interpret meanings in Hemingway's books right now, or probably ever, but I did enjoy it just for the story and some of the descriptions, however brief they were. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, I think. The other classic I read is quite on the opposite side of the spectrum, and that is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. This is almost 600 pages, but I read this because in my oil and gas class we read a chapter out of it, chapter 88 to be specific, to do with how a whale is marked and how you know which whale belongs to who. This was a beautifully written book. I will say that right off. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. However, it felt overly long primarily because it reads more like a treatise on whaling than it does a book with an actual plot. Even if it's a journey plot, it didn't read like that at all. It almost feels as if Ahab's revenge on the whale is an afterthought to make people want to read it. Also, the ending surprised the heck out of me. I had no idea that's how this book ended. At all. So that was fun. And the last book I read in March was Batman Nightwalker by Marie Lu. This is a young adult origin story, more or less, for Batman. It takes place in Gotham City, obviously, Bruce Wayne, all that fun stuff. He gets into trouble with the police a little bit, crashes a car, and so he has to do community service, and they put him doing community service in Arkham Asylum. He meets this girl there who's a Nightwalker, and they go from there. I thought this was just a really fun origin story. It is book 2 of 3 in the DC Heroes series. They're companion novels more than anything. Like I said, I like this book. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because it's just a fun, almost origin story. You see him start to put things together, put the pieces together, and you can see where it would go from there. The writing felt a little bit simple, but given the age group, it made sense. And part of that as well might be how many young adult books I've been reading lately, and I needed something a little bit more by the time the month had ended. Those are all 18 books I read in March. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Let me know which of these books you have read or liked or what you thought of them down below in the comments. Please forgive me for my lack of ability to speak. Clearly that's not going well for me today, it's fine. But if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button down below, and I will leave my Goodreads linked in the down bar if you want to check it out. Until my next video though, bye!